Hello, Huge Movie Fanatic Nate coming at you to review this time The Hills Have Eyes. Unrated. Actually, that's not a part of the title, but it kind of funnily looks like it is. But this is Hills Have Eyes 2006, the remake, of course, to Hills Have Eyes, which was actually produced in part by Wes Craven, which is kind of disappointing. I reviewed the first two, or the original Hills Have Eyes movies earlier this year on the fantastic recently released Blu-ray, and I just felt, I knew I was going to do this eventually. I didn't think it'd take this long, but at any rate, a while back I made myself rewatch these movies. Actually, this one isn't that bad, but I barely made it through the second one. So I'm coming at you to review this one, Hills Have Eyes 2006, which I got somewhere along the line used, previously viewed for $3, looks like 2009. I thought for $3 I could add it to the collection or whatever. So let's get into it. One of the things I do think this movie does well is the opening credits with the kind of the history or whatever of the horrible American government testing these nuclear bombs in these remote desert locations and stuff like that, and making all these craters. I don't know if those. I don't know if that stuff's really there or not. I imagine maybe it could be or whatever, but basically the opening credits are kind of cool, and we kind of get a little bit of the backstory just with the opening credits and news clippings and kind of gross pictures and stuff of basically how the bad guys ended up the way they did, without really having to say it in the movie itself. So that's one of the kind of cool things that the remake does that the original doesn't. Of course, one of the cool things about not saying anything about where they came from is we experience exactly, the audience experience is exactly what the people are, which is they're just becoming attached by these people and they don't have their back, their life story. And that's kind of like what the remake of Halloween did, was just like explains way too much, and it's really not necessary in my opinion. But a lot of remakes do it because things weren't explained necessarily in the original movie, so it's like, oh, well, here can be a reason why this movie exists, we'll explain shit. But anyway, that's kind of one of the things that I do give this movie a little bit of props for, is just flushing out a little more of the, I guess, backstory or history of these people, these miners, which basically didn't want to leave the land, and it's just like back in the 40s and 50s or whatever, and it's just like government's like, okay, well, they probably didn't know they were there, they wouldn't have cared anyway, but they're just like, okay, bombs away. And it's just nasty seeing the opening credits and just all these bomb tests and shit, and all these troops just sitting there just like, oh, let's just expose all you guys. Let's face it, the military doesn't give a fuck about their soldiers. Otherwise, if they did, they wouldn't, put them in harm's way or whatever. But it's just like the opening credits of this movie is using so much real footage of just bomb tests and stuff, really just riles your feathers and gets you just all pissed off about just what the horrible people that control the world just have done and do and continue to do. And it's just like, anyway, it makes you mad. And going with that same kind of premise of that, exploring that more clearly about the bomb tests having created these guys, much like Godzilla or whatever, we kind of see for the first time, we know the character in the original movie of Doug went this way or whatever, the opposite way of the, Big Bob or whatever, and he found all kinds of junk and just in a pile. But the kind of cool thing about this movie is he goes out there and sees this huge crater, which is probably done computer graphics, I don't know, because this wasn't even filmed in America, I don't think. I think it was filmed in a Muslim country or whatever. I can't remember where it was, but for tax purposes, or to make it cheaper, they made it out of the country, of course. How American is that? But anyway, it was kind of cool to see this huge crater where the Hills people, well, in this movie they're more miners. The mines have eyes, it should be called, because these are like really not Hills people. They live in the mines, I think, which we explore more in the sequel to the remake. But it's kind of cool how they put all these cars and vehicles and stuff of the former victims in this huge, crater that was created by presumably an atom bomb test in the 40s or 50s or whatever. So that was kind of a cool thing to actually get to see what Doug comes across in this version instead of just hearing it from the Doug in the original version. That was kind of cool. the first half of this movie is very much a carbon copy of the original movie, which, you know, since I love that movie, I don't really necessarily have a problem with. I mean, in a way, it's like, why are you doing a remake if you're just going to copy what's already come before? But part of me can't help but, you know, not completely hate it because like I say, I love the first movie. I will say that the actors in this movie, the people they got to fill the roles of the, you know, the original cast from the original movie, was kind of cool. And seeing whatever his name is, the bad guy from Silence of the Lambs as Bob or whatever, and that one woman from Breakdown, I think, as the mom. And I actually like, well, of course you got, what's her name? Vanessa Shaw from Eyes Wide Shut, and who I worked at Suncoast in like 1994 or whatever, and I think sometime around that time she was in this movie that I never seen, well, I never saw by my own choice, called Hocus Pocus. And back when, kind of when that movie came out, or it came sell-through or whatever, maybe around Halloween and shit, they'd always play fucking Hocus Pocus on the goddamn TV in the store. But I, you know, when I look up every now and then, you'd see Vanessa Shaw was like really young in that movie, and she is really kind of sexy and whatever, and that was like, you know, it almost makes you want to watch the movie just to see the kind of all of Vanessa Shaw stuff in Hocus Pocus. But that's kind of the first movie I ever became aware of her in, and I just thought she was so sexy in that movie, and kind of how she filled out the sweater and all this kind of stuff. And then when I saw Eyes Wide Shut, I didn't really necessarily know it's her, but then obviously when I saw this, I knew it was all two of those, or all three of them, the girls were the same girl, and it's just like, oh, cool. So this girl, having formerly worked with Stanley Kubrick, now is in the remake of Hills Have Eyes as the older daughter, the one who's got the small child. I think that the guy that they got to play Doug was absolutely fantastic, and he has the potential to kind of be an annoying character, but he's more of a character who, he's annoying to the characters in the movie, but you as a viewer, you sympathize with him. You kind of side with the Doug character, and I absolutely love the guy they got to play Doug. I think he was cast absolutely fantastically, and I like that character in this movie. I really like that guy. I could almost see a movie with that guy in called just Doug, just of him, his just daily life trying to sell cell phones or whatever. But long story short, I liked the guy who played Doug in this movie, and obviously his wife, Vanessa Shaw, is attractive in her kind of the hippies. She's got this cool kind of hippie dress on. And I knew I'd seen that girl from Santa's Sleigh somewhere before. I reviewed Santa's Sleigh last December, I think. I'd seen her. It's the same girl, I think, from Santa's Sleigh who plays the younger sister in this movie. Who she's, you know, sexy or whatever, and she plays, is the name Brenda? I can't remember names in this movie, or I can't remember names. So she plays the younger sister, and I actually like the kid, so she's cool, she's good and sexy and attractive and stuff, and I actually like the kid who plays Bobby in this movie, and I'm surprised watching it now again, being, you know, older now than I was when I saw it. Originally, this kid is like actually probably, or what would appear to be actually a real teenager when they filmed this, which is really cool. I mean, he's younger, definitely got to be younger than the guy who played Bobby was when they filmed the original movie, and by having him be so young, it just adds so much realism to the movie. And I actually liked the kid, and as a matter of fact, not that I'd ever want anyone to remake Harold and Maude, but if someone ever did, and well, the kid's older now, but I mean, he would have been a perfect Harold, like as this kid is in this movie. Would have been a perfect Harold if they if some asshole got the notion to remake Harold and Maude back in 2005, 6, 7ish. This kid would have been such a great Harold. He's got that about him. So strangely enough, I like a lot of the cast in this movie. One of my complaints about this movie is just the bad guys are gross. Unlike the first movie where you kind of have these people who are separated out. You kind of know who Pluto is, and you know who Papa Jupiter is, and obviously, whatever his name is, Michael Berryman was a huge part of the first two Hills Have Eyes movies. I mean, just the face of the name Hills Have Eyes, you just think of Michael Berryman. So you don't really have anything like that in this. I mean, all the bad guys are just kind of the Wrong Turn. Wrong Turn had come out maybe 3 years before this, and it's just, K and B just makeup effects, making all these nasty, mutated monsters and shit, and one of these guys looks exactly like that guy from the movie, the guy's like, hey you guys, from that movie, which I don't really like very much at all, called The Goonies. I mean, I think it's supposed to be Pluto in this movie, is just taken right out of The Goonies. You think it's that guy. I was waiting for him to say, hey you guys. But the bad guys unfortunately fall flat in this movie. I don't like the bad guys' portrayal. I think the bad guys, you know, the mountain people or the miner people, whatever the hell you want to call these, the mutos, I don't like in this rendition of this movie. Papa Jupiter was such a big part of the original movie, and it's just like in this movie he's like, I can't remember who plays him. That I think it's that long-haired guy at the end of this movie. He doesn't really even show up until the end of this movie. I can't remember what his name is. He's got some name. He's been in other, I think he's been in like canon movies, you know, and stuff like that in the 80s or whatever, but I think he's always generally a bad guy. But Papa Jupiter was such a huge part of the original movie, and it's just like, and in this movie he's like, I don't know, I can't remember if he's even mentioned, but I mean, if he is mentioned, he only shows up, I think, at the end of the movie or something like that, and it's just like, you don't even know that he's Papa Jupiter necessarily until you read the credits, and it's just like, the way they portray like the baddies in this movie is so stupid. They don't separate them, like you don't know who's who or what. I think you hear someone say Pluto or whatever, you know, relating to the other Mongoloid guy, but yeah, disappointing because Jupiter was such a huge part of the original movie, and in this movie he's not even there, and he just shows up at the end, and it's just like, what? Obviously this movie is just way more nasty and just gross and blatantly just there to just make you go, oh, and gross. Like the scene where they blow up, basically light on fire Bob, and it's like 3 or 4 times as long as it is in the original movie. It seems like he's burning for 15 minutes, and it's probably not, but it seems like it. It just goes on and on and on and on. And the first half of this movie I actually don't hate. I think it's done pretty well and a pretty, you know, nice, basically almost beat by beat retelling of the majority, I'd say the first 2/3 of the first movie. The problem I have with this movie is the second half, when you get to the next day. Kind of the first movie, the next day only lasted maybe 20 minutes or something like that. It was probably just like a third of the original movie. In this movie it's like half. The next day is is like half of this movie, and it drags on and on and on. Basically there's this scene where the mountain people, miner people, live in this, basically, I don't think they live necessarily in the mines in this movie. I think they live in this, you know, the towns they created in the 40s and 50s to basically explode and drop an atom bomb and destroy and shit. It's like, it's kind of cool, you know, like continuing with that, you know, atom bomb test theme, as they have this, they must have had to build this shit, which it must have cost, they saved so much money like going there, you know, to wherever to film this, but then they had to build this 40s or 50s atom bomb town shit or whatever. Anyway, the second half of this movie drags and drags and drags and drags, and it takes place around this ghost town which was built for the atom bomb tests and all this shit, and it just, there's this one scene where they knock Bobby out and put him in this, whatever it is, this meat locker, and just, it's just like, it's just so blatantly trying to just be nasty and gross, and there's all kinds of body parts in there. And second half of this movie, this character Bobby is just like covered in blood, and is there a picture of him covered in blood? Yeah. It's just like covered in blood, and he's just killing off bad guys. And Ruby in this movie is kind of, I don't know, Ruby, it's kind of cool how Ruby was all like sexy in the original movie. In this movie she's, I don't know, she doesn't have any lines. She's, yeah, I don't know if I like Ruby. I mean, she steals this red sweatshirt, ha ha ha, get it, Ruby, but who needs it? Well, I guess at night you need a sweatshirt in the desert, but, so long story short, I like the first half of this movie and rather dislike the second half of this movie. I feel like this movie is definitely probably 20 minutes minimum too long, and they should have dragged and dragged and dragged the second half or the next day. This movie would have gotten 2 stars from me, but because of that just dragging and dragging and dragging, I'm only going to be able to give it 1 3/4 stars out of 4 stars. It's actually, having revisited it, it's, I'd say, maybe in my opinion, one of the better remakes of the first decade of the 21st century. I think that kind of going along with the, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, I do feel like it, like I've just said already, it is one of the better remakes of the 70s classic horror movies. I think they got the family right. The mountain people, the baddies in this movie, I think they got completely wrong. They're just nasty, and I don't know, it's just, yeah, I don't really like it very much. So that's my review of Hills Have Eyes 2006. I mean, I guess really the only reason why I like the first half is it's pretty much a carbon copy of the first half of the original. So, and you can tell because when the movie starts to segue from the original in the second half, it's kind of where it gets where I don't like it and drags on and on and on. So whatever. So, but you know, I was surprised how much I actually kind of liked the first half, having revisited it, and I didn't like the second half. So thank you very much for watching this review, and as always, we'll catch you next time.